The first local 3D AR studio is here. It's called 3D Gen Studio, and it basically gives you a real studio interface for all the open source 3D AR workflows we have been creating so far. You can run Trellis2, Qwen Image, Neon 3D, etc. all inside one interface, and it comes with dedicated tools like a mesh editor and texture inpainting. The best thing is this new tool is open source, completely local and free. So I will show you how I set it up, what you need to watch out for, and how you can actually use it effectively. So let's get into it. So before we jump in, let me quickly explain what this tool actually is. Because 3D Gen Studio is not a replacement for ComfyUI. ComfyUI still does all the heavy lifting, the image generation, the mesh generation, and all the actual AR processing in the background. Think of it more as a visual project manager for all your local 3D pipelines. You've got 5 stages, so we can create images with it, image edit, mesh gen, mesh edit, and texturing. And you move your asset through all of these stages, like through each stage, like a real production pipeline. So basically everything stays organized and everything is visual, and you always know where you are in the process. On top of that, it comes also with its own creative tools. For example, we have a 3D mesh viewer, a mesh editor with inpainting, and you can even import custom PNG brushes, for example. Alright guys, so first step is now, of course, obviously the installation part and how we can set it up. Before we get started with the installation, it's really important that we also install the prerequisites that we have here. We have pre-requirements that we have to set up before we can start with the installation. And that is one that we set up node.js. So you will see that we can go and install node.js basically with only one click. We will quickly navigate to nodejs.org. So basically you will then have a Windows installer here that you can then directly download from there and then execute it. And once you have executed this and everything is working for you, we can then go ahead and now clone 3D Gen Studio, which I'm going to show you in the next step. But what you can do basically is you first choose your location where you would like to install the file. And as you can see here, I just chose that I would like to set it up on my F drive. And here I will simply then type in PowerShell. Once PowerShell opened, as you can see here, we then need our first command. And to do that, I will go to the 3D Gen Studio GitHub page, as you can see here. And we can do that basically in 3 simple steps. So as you can see, first step is that we git cloning the repository. So you can simply here then copy the path and then pasting it into the PowerShell that we just opened. Then we are pasting in the command, and then it will clone the 3D Gen Studio already in our drive folder where we would like to have it. We can then search for it, and as you can see on the bottom, you will then see 3D Gen Studio. We can then also close our PowerShell window, and then we can go in here again and type in PowerShell, again to be then in the right location. Next step is then that we type in npm install. So I'm also going to copy that and then pasting it in here, and then hitting enter to then make sure that the installation is running. And then as a last step, we can also see that we have here npm run dev. So also make sure to paste this one. And as you can see, this is already all it took. So we now have a working link that we can then use to open 3D Gen Studio. And we simply just need to copy this link, open a new browser tab, and then we have access to 3D Gen Studio. All right, so once we have 3D Gen Studio opened like this, first step, but the most important step is for now that we need to connect our ComfyUI installation to 3D Gen Studio. And to do that is that we go here right on the top to the wheel icon, to the system settings. And then you will also see that we have here APIs to connect. And you will notice on the right side that we also have a button called ComfyUI. So we need to click on this one. And once we are here, we can then give path to ComfyUI. Basically, we then navigate to our ComfyUI easy install, what I have usually installed and always show in my videos. Then we're just going to click on ComfyUI and dive into this folder, then copy into the path field that we have over here, and then just click on save all changes. And this is basically how you successfully connect then ComfyUI to 3D Gen Studio. Really important is before we start working basically with 3D Gen Studio is that we also launch then our ComfyUI, because you need to have it running in the background basically while we're working with it. You will, by the way, also notice that in the 3D Gen Studio folder, we have a ComfyUI workflows folder. This is provided by Visual Bruno, the owner of 3D Gen Studio, basically, who developed this tool. And you can basically see here all workflows already inside that you can also use. And once you then have the models installed and all in the right place, you can then go ahead and use them. To set up a workflow in 3D Gen Studio is also very easy. So we need to go to Assets first, then to the Workflow tab that we have over here. And then you will have a section where you can click on Import JSON. So basically you can then go to the ComfyUI workflows folder here, and we can then import, for example, as a first workflow, the Gen image with zImageTurbo.json as a first example, basically. And here it's very important that we then import the parameter that we're going to use. And this is of course here first that we need a prompt. So basically the prompt/text prompt that we have in ComfyUI basically. So just make sure to import this one so we can then actually give it also a prompt in 3D Gen Studio and that we have access to this parameter. And then as a next thing, we also need a seed, of course, so we can change the seed number in case we need it. And then as a first step, we could also choose a third parameter. And then for the output, we only need the save image parameter. And then once done, you can just hit here save workflow. And then it will basically pop up then on the imported workflows page. And once we have that, we can then in theory already use it in case we want. Speaking of 3D AR workflows, let me guys quickly introduce you to today's video sponsor, Hi3D. Hi3D is my #1 choice for generating 3D models for 3D printing, and my honest recommendation. They just released version 2.1, which includes a new fast mode that lets you generate high quality models in as little as 2 minutes. With Hi3D 2.1, you can generate various assets such as portraits, sculptures, reliefs, and much more faster than ever before. You can directly access 2.1 now in the Hi3D interface and upload your reference in there to then generate high quality models in a much faster time than ever before. You can also see that Hi3D is creating such detailed textures as well as model details when we go here to the diffuse tab. On top of that, they have added also a new image editing mode for generating detailed multi-views with one click, letting you choose the latest state-of-the-art AI image models, so you can create perfect reference images before you start generating your 3D model. The quality speaks for itself, and 2.1 lets you get there faster than ever. If you're interested, I will leave a direct link down below in the video description for you to check out. In case you would like to import your own ComfyUI workflow, that's of course also possible. There are just some steps you have to follow along, so I'm going to show you this now as well step by step. So first we have to obviously go into ComfyUI, then I can open here a new workflow that I would like to use. And this is the one I would like to export now to 3D Gen Studio. To do that is that we first have to go in the ComfyUI settings and then enable the dev mode over here, as you can see. So you will see then when you go to File and in the export option, you will basically see that you have here then a file export API option that you can click on, and then you can save it as any other workflow. Once then back in 3D Gen Studio, you can then click here on import JSON again and then import the workflow that we just saved out of ComfyUI. Once we have that, you will see then that the parameters will be recognized over here, and you can then simply select the ones you need. And this is basically how you also import your own ComfyUI workflow. Here in this example, of course, we need like a load image node to import our image. Just make sure always when you do that, you need the right format for it. So obviously when we import an image node, we need an image as well. And this is what we do then with all the other nodes as well. So always just make sure that you're choosing the right format. We can then also on output to save, choose here preview 3D and image, and then save the workflow. Of course, also make sure that you choose here, not as I did here wrongly, the preview 3D and animation as a mesh and not an image, because we need it as a mesh output. So once we have then imported our workflows, we are then ready to start our first new project. And you can then go to the projects page, click on create new project, and we can then give it here basically a name. We can then also choose a preset. So we can go to Kanban or graph. So Kanban will be just like a, let's say, table view. Here you will see that you then have this dashboard. It goes from images to texturing to then create our first image with the workflow that we just imported. We can basically click here on add new image. Then we go here and choosing then ComfyUI workflow. But you could also, for example, of course, upload your own image in case you would like to have that. We can then choose here as well, then under ComfyUI workflow, the gen image with set image turbo workflow that we need. And as you can see, here's then the prompt field that we just used and imported in the workflow section. And you can then type in whatever you would like to have here. And once we have done that, we can then simply click here on start workflow to start the workflow then. And then once done, you will see that it then starts running. It will also always give us a percentage over here. And you can also track, of course, the progress always in your ComfyUI easy install window, as you can see here. Once this is done, you can then see your image over here. As you can see, we created now this elf, and we will then have it as a visual representation inside 3D Gen Studio. From here, and this is the really powerful thing, we can now drag it directly to the next step. We can create, of course, this way, multiple image variations and so on. And we could go here directly then with the next workflow by choosing then here then also giving it a name first, because otherwise it won't work. But then we can also give it here, for example, the option then to choose Qwen Image edit and go from there, which is of course really cool. You can, by the way, also always re-edit your imported workflows in case something is not working. I did this here, for example, with the Qwen Image edit workflow, where I noticed that something that it's not showing up in my section. So I just went ahead in here and then choose the right format. As you can see here, I selected by mistake not the image input. So I just updated the workflow quickly. Then I can go directly inside here. Everything is still the same and saved. And then you can go to ComfyUI again, and then you will see your workflow then over here. And here I'm just saying like generate a highly detailed normal map of the image. And then I just click on run action again and run the workflow. And then this is our result basically, because obviously it helps a lot most of the times to have a normal image instead of a textured one for Trellis2 to then generate our 3D mesh, which I'm going to do next by having it here on the mesh gen section. Here again, I'm re-editing the Trellis2 high quality workflow so that it actually shows up. As you can see here, I forgot to put it as a mesh instead of an image. So I'm quickly fixing that here by selecting it as a mesh. Same I'm doing for other parameters where I might missed it. And then once I'm done, I'm clicking here on update workflow again, and then it will basically show up once I click here then on action again, choose ComfyUI, and then I will see over here that basically I can now run the workflow again in case we would like to generate our 3D mesh. Once I then chose my settings, I can then basically click on run action again to then generate our 3D mesh. And of course, always give it a name, because otherwise it won't work, as you can see here. So once you have done that, hit run action, and now it will then create our 3D model inside 3D Gen Studio. And once then processed, as you can see, we then have even here a small 3D viewer, which is of course really cool, because now we can directly inspect our 3D model, and you will then basically see it as a visual representation here. And we can also switch the mode, so we can go to normal, as you can see here, and then also inspect it. We could then also do further steps. So for example, dragging it into mesh edit or the texturing one in case you would like that. A really handy feature is of course as well that when you go to meshes, where you should see now your 3D model, then you click here on edit, and this will then open the mesh editor, as you can see here. And here you also have different options, like for example, you can model, texture painting, and sculpt, and so on, which is of course really cool to then further refine your mesh. We can of course also import different workflows. So here as an example, I also imported my own workflows, like for example, an albedo LoRa workflow, which is using an albedo LoRa to delight our images. So you can see that I choose the different settings here. Same with the flux client separation LoRa. So this is also one separation LoRa that I showed in my previous video. Studio, where you can then split the image, and that we then can use effectively in 3D Gen Studio, basically just by importing the parameters and everything we need. You can see this is quite fast to do. It just only takes a few minutes to really find the right parameters and everything you need. And then once I imported my additional workflows, I'm now going to create also a new project. Here I can give it a name again, and I can also choose this time the graph mode. So to show you this quickly, and the real power of 3D Gen Studio, because basically we can now hook up also all those workflows together in one consistent stream and to run them all at once basically and have them all as an overview. So that's really cool as well. So we can choose then here as first an image that we would like to have, for example, this elf, and then we could create different nodes around that basically. So in the end, I decided here to go with this image, and I'm also choose here like this flux client separation LoRa that you could see here that I created with an image node. Make sure that you connect it here properly, and I think we can skip this connection here for now because we don't need it. But once you have that, you can then basically reconnect it, and then you can also choose the correct file that you need. So you can then click on custom value to choose the image that we have on the front, and then we also say here, for example, separate the head with our separation LoRa, and I'm doing this for every part basically. So as you can see, I'm choosing here another image, doing here the same thing by just saying like separate the hands, and then building my workflow like this, which is of course also very handy because you can do that for every node and it stays kind of non-destructive. You can then also see here that we get a really nice detailed image. And then I just chose here, you know, that I also created a 3D node in the stream. And then I hooked up here the Trellis2 GGOF workflow and then basically can run it. Obviously, as you can see, this model didn't turn out that great, but you can always rerun it with different settings, of course, and see what works best for you. Same here, we then have the whole body. I think here it's working quite nicely. I would say overall you have your textures as well. And you can then, of course, go with the next step, then hook up via API, you know, for example, Triple Smart Mesh and so on, or your own local retopology tool. Like there's also a quad remesh workflow basically in the ComfyUI example folder that I showed you. One cool thing is as well that you can go here also to edit. So you can click on the image that you created, and then you have a small interactive image editor, which I think is a really nice gimmick because you can then also on the go basically edit your images in case you needed to have it more sharper, or like a shadow remover as well and stuff like this. And this is really fast and really straightforward to use. And then as a last step, I also wanted to show you how you can do a texture inpainting basically. Just to give you a quick warning up front, this took a lot of VRAM actually and was quite slow. So I think it's going to be improved in the future, but you can definitely give it a try, especially when you have a strong GPU, and see what you get out of it. I tried it on my RTX 5080 and got okay result, I would say, but overall this is still a really powerful tool and can be definitely improved, maybe with a different workflow like the texture workflow that I showed you in my last video, which you can check out here basically, and which you can of course also hook up for the inpainting section. But basically what we need to do for that is that we go to meshes, then you can choose the mesh here. For example, I also created here this wolf boy, and once I then imported it in here and went to the texturing section, we can then focus on our object basically that we see here. And what we can do now is zooming in on what we need, and you can see I imported here already this Qwen Image edit inpainting workflow that you will also find in the ComfyUI workflow folder in 3D Gen Studio that I showed you. Here it's just important that you're choosing the right settings, for example. So it's basically this workflow that you can see over here. So with the image ref, what we can do now is then first choosing a prompt, for example, like face close up to refine our face texture that we have over here. Just make sure then to zoom in onto the image, and you will also, by the way, need to import the brush before that. You can do that quickly in the asset editor, by the way. And then once you have that, you can then simply paint an area, as you can see here, on the face to refine it. And once we have that, we can then prompt something like face close up and then hit here regenerate zone. And this is the part then that might take a while. And you can also choose here, for example, projection views, which then, you know, would project the texture from different angles, but we're choosing only one here. All right, and once processed, as you can see, this is then the kind of new face texture Here, I would say in my test, it was semi-successful, so definitely something to keep in mind. So you might need to regenerate here and give it a few tries, but this is basically how it works then. There are also some really good examples on the 3D Gen Studio Discord that I can also show you here by the developer of the tool, which is Visual Bruno, who also set up, by the way, the ComfyUI Trellis2 node package. And he showed here a really cool example just to show you guys quickly. Basically, he put here the stickers on that you can do with the painting. So this might be a better example for that case, that you can basically put really specific stuff on your mesh in case you need it. Here, same thing, basically, that you can also paint on your mesh and do then specific treatments on your mesh that you need. Maybe you will also see that you have on the right side then kind of those layers that you can use then for blending different opacities or different layers on top, that you don't destroy your paint that you did on the first layer. So definitely quite cool, and I'm looking forward that 3D Gen Studio is getting further developed with smoother interaction and useful tools. So my honest take on this tool is I think it's really cool and perfect for local 3D artists in our community. In case you prefer local 3D AR workflows, I think this is getting a really solid option to really organize your pipeline inside one tool. It's specifically for anyone working with Trellis2, HoneyOn 3D, and so on. It's not yet for total beginners. So in case you're a total beginner with no ComfyUI experience yet, then it's better to check out my previous videos. Anyone who also wants to have cloud convenience, this is of course not the right tool for you maybe. So as always, in case you have liked this video, please make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and let me know in the comments what you think about this tool. And as mentioned, please check out the link in the description where I put together this Trellis2 workflow guide in a detailed PDF, where I put in a lot of work actually, so would be really much appreciated in case you would like to check it out. And actually, having said that, see you on the next one.